Welcome to the Women Who Change the World podcast, the place where everyday women world changers share their stories to inspire, challenge, and equip you to change your world. And here we have part 2 of this wonderful interview. It had so many amazing things that to cut any out would be sad. And with that, we are back.
I want to shift a little bit because I believe that telling your money where to go is an essential part of self-care.
100%. I agree with you.
I talk about self-care a lot. I don't talk about it in the way of, go to the spa, go do this though. There is a place near me that's got a floating salt bath that I've got on my vision board to go to next year.
Let me know how that is. I've seen those pop up around me as well.
I am knowing where your money goes, knowing that you're not, I stayed in the black this paycheck, that kind of thing. Wondering where, if you're gonna have enough money for food or enough money for gas or enough money for all of those things cause stress in your life, and that is the antithesis of self-care.
Correct.
But writing a budget and living a budget is extremely stressful. Okay, it's not for you because you've been doing it for a while. You didn't see her whole body posture change. That was hilarious. But for somebody who's not doing it, it's a stressful thing. Okay, so we're going to step away from you who's experienced to somebody who's not.
I get that. But my first thing is, yes, I understand it's stressful, right? Because anything new, change is stress. Good change, bad change is stress, right? Having a baby is stressful. Moving is stressful. Going on vacation is stressful. Learning to do a budget is hard. It can be stressful. And I'm going to steal the words from anyone who's familiar with the Whole30. It's like, I love the quote in there when she's like, her quote from in the book on Whole30 is, drinking black coffee is not hard. Fighting cancer is hard. Bearing a child is hard. Right. Mm-hmm. So in that mindset, creating a budget is not hard. Right. Mm-hmm. In that sense of things that we need to go through life. But what is harder than creating a budget? Staying in debt, staying where you are right now, not changing your habits, and a year from now being not in a better place. That's hard. Mm-hmm. And that, unfortunately, is exactly why people are where they are, because they didn't change, right? Creating a habit. So with I tell my clients, a lot of my clients come to me exactly there, never created a budget, or they created a budget, but never lived on a budget, because creating a budget and living on a budget are two different habits, right?
Yes.
So, and I tell them, all right, if we're coaching, say we're coaching one-on-one, mm-hmm. I always recommend okay, then let's look at doing at least a 3-month package, because it's a new habit, and you have, and not that they need my permission, but I think it's stress relieving for them to hear me say this to them, because I never tell people what to do with their money, right? Mm-hmm. That's not my job.
Right.
I tell them it's going to take at least 3 months, usually 3 to 6 months, to create and live on a budget, because it's a new habit. It's a new skill.
Right.
Right. And I give them permission to fail, with a caveat of, failure is not really failure. Failure is learning.
Right.
That's part of that growth mindset that we were talking about before. Mm-hmm. Right. So many people fear, well, why am I going to create a budget? I can't live on it. So they're not even going to try, because they don't know where to start. They just need help.
Right.
And so when someone says to me, going back to what you said, yes, I understand it. It's a new skill, right? It's not easy. I'm not going to say, I don't accept that it's hard. I accept that it's not easy. You see the difference?
I see the difference in what you're saying. It's a matter of verbiage.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of those things.
And I do that because when you tell yourself, it's that belief system again. If you tell yourself, this is hard, I can't do this, what's going to happen?
You quit.
Right. If you're like, this is not easy, but I can overcome, I can create this new habit,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be able to do it.
I tell my children all the time, you were made to do hard things.
Yes.
You were made to do hard things. And then I remind myself, look, you gave birth without medication, you can handle anything.
True story.
In an apartment. I delivered number 4 in an apartment
Oh,
without
wow.
medication.
By number 4, you knew what you're doing though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then number 5, 6, and 7 was totally different. So it was kind of crazy that way. It's the way I see it, with knowing where my money's going, knowing that if I run my card at the grocery store, it's not going to get declined.
Mhm.
There is nothing worse when it comes to money than having your card decline and you're buying food for your family.
Yeah. Or that feeling of you just paid for your groceries and now you're thinking, do I have enough money left to pay the electric bill?
Yes. I will tell you, the first thing I do on pay, because we pay every 2 weeks in our electric, and we set it up that way. We like it. That's the way we get paid.
Mhm.
So it's like every 2 weeks, and it allows for fluctuation of the weather.
Mhm.
I mean, it was 62 degrees on Christmas Day
Christmas
here.
Day. Yep.
And we're like, what in the world is this? So we haven't really used a lot of heat, haven't needed to. So it kind of allows us that flexibility there. But the first thing I do Friday morning when I wake up, I grab my phone, I pay my electric bill.
Why?
It's a habit.
It's a habit. Okay.
It's a habit. I pay my electric bill on Friday morning when we get paid. Like, there's the electric bill, bam, it's paid. I go into town, I drop off my water bill. Why? Because I don't want to be without water. 9 people not able to flush the toilet? That's disgusting.
Scary.
I'd rather be without electricity than without water.
I can see that. Although I'm like, I'm on a well. So if I'm out of electricity, I'm out of both.
We were on a well. We lived on the side of a mountain. We were on a well, and it froze over. We were living in Pennsylvania. It froze over. So we
That's what I
had a
meant.
we had a wood burning stove, and my husband cooked eggs on the wood burning stove. All the things you learn to manage. But knowing where everything is, knowing that your kids are going to get fed, you're going to have gas to go to work, you're going to have electricity and the internet and, all the things that we need in this modern age. That is self-care in a very, very basic and primal way. Because if you think about the single moms living on welfare,
Mm-hmm.
what do they want? They want housing. They want to be able to feed their children. They want to make sure that they're covered, clothing.
Yep.
And they want the utilities they need. Okay, if those are basic self-care things, and you break it down to that, you cannot really take care of yourself if you don't do those things.
Yep. It's the 4 walls, and this comes into play a lot when, if I'm dealing with a client who is either, trying to get out of debt or whatever circumstance they're in, their money, they don't have enough money. Like, the end of the month, there's still a month, there's still bills, the money's gone, right?
Right.
And we have to step back and be like, okay, we need to take care of the basics first. Because when you, and this, oh my gosh, this is like it just, when it comes to like collectors, the games that collectors play with people's minds makes this Christian woman want to throat punch them.
We're getting violent down here.
Because what they do is they mess with people's minds and they play these games to manipulate their behaviors so that they put that Visa card or that whatever, and actually credit card companies are actually pretty good about this normally, but whatever that debt is, to get that payment ahead of their basic needs.
Right.
And so when it comes to helping a client who's in collections because they don't have enough money to pay all of their debts plus all of their bills, the first thing we do is we have to sit down and create a budget. Okay. And they tell me, I can't create a budget. I don't have enough money. Sweetheart, that's exactly why you need to create a budget. And we prioritize needs first. And this is what I call a red line budget. And what a red line budget is where we pay the needs first. And then we go down the line of our debts. And there's different ways to list those out that I won't get into here. And then there's a red line. And sometimes there are bills under the red line that don't get paid because there isn't enough money. But here's the power in this. That self-care piece you're talking about, you make that choice. You decide where your money goes. Not the person on the collection call calling your grandmother names, telling you that you're gonna lose, everything. Because what they do is they push those buttons. It becomes an emotional game.
Right.
And what happens when you get paid, you want to pay that person so they stop calling you. Right? This is something that I walked through with my own family, not my personal household, but within my extended family. And I have, and it's my job to empower my client or my family, whoever, to say, look, shut them down. So we get on a plan. And my biggest tip for anyone dealing with collections right now is be proactive. You call them. You create a budget. You send it to them. Email, fax, I don't care. And say, this is my budget. You're not getting paid this month because you're below the line. Right? And then sometimes this comes into a pro rata situation and pro rata does not work with things like your home. But when you're dealing with like credit cards, so your credit card bill is $100. Well, you don't have it. So we pro rata out on a percentage base. And so you're getting $25 this month because that's what I can afford. So it's that communication piece. I've actually had a person, and I love this story. I won't go into all the details. He would go to his car every Wednesday on his lunch break and call his creditors and give them an update this week, because he got paid weekly. And he's like, this week, this is what I'm sending in. This is what I can afford. And what that did is not only stop them from calling him and harassing him. He actually had collectors saying, stop calling us, just send us the money. We know you're paying. So we need to take back that power. Now, granted, if you're in debt and in their debts that are like, barring something like a medical bill, right? If you're their mortgage debt, back rent, you owe electric company, you owe back taxes, student loans, credit cards. My favorite debt, of course, is the debt consolidation loan, which you're back in the same hole.
Yeah.
Another story. All those things. You need to take responsibility for your debts. And you do need to repay those debts. But you don't need to be manipulated. You don't need to be shamed or guilted. You just need to step in, take responsibility. Like, all right, I screwed up. Because if you're in debt more than you can pay, you screwed up. Like I said, barring the medical bill or something.
Right.
You weren't managing your money God's way. You weren't honoring God with your money. And now we're going to do that. We're going to honor God with money. We're going to repay our debts. And we're going to get out of here with a sound mind. Right?
Yes.
And you're exactly right. That goes back to that piece of that what'd you call it? Self-care.
Yeah.
But you can't do that when you don't know that you're going to eat. You can't do that when, like you said, you don't know if you're going to pay the electric bill. And there is a method to getting out of that madness.
I've had those medical bills pop up and you're like, whoa, I thought this was covered by insurance. Apparently not. And then you're scrambling to try to get it paid and to deal with that. We've had, my husband was diagnosed with cancer in 2018 and we thought it was gone and then it wasn't and found out again. And so medical bills just like pop up.
Yeah.
Circular like that.
Right.
And dealing with cancer is a whole other level of medical bills.
Yes, it is.
It's a whole other level. And that is something that I've had to deal with is people like, well, you should have been on top of it. And it's like, well, no. Unless you've dealt with it, you have no idea what's going on.
And that's another thing that, I talk about I do what I do because I want people to be able to do more, give more, serve more. I want them to find that financial freedom level, whatever it is for their family and their legacy. But it also means when something happens that you are not, we talked about that, the wife who had, or the husband, whichever, has their own idea what's going on with finances, and something happens to their spouse. So now they're thrown into not only that personal crisis, but now into a financial crisis. When you're dealing with cancer, and I don't need to tell you this, you don't need to be stressing about money on top of the health of a loved one. You don't need your loved one to be worrying about money, because that's not helping them get better. Right.
Right.
And that's when I said it. So barring the medical issues, you made a mistake. You overspent, you borrowed money you shouldn't borrow. Now, when it comes to medical, it's still your responsibility, right?
Right.
It's still your responsibility to pay it back. It's still, and again, that's a mindset choice again, because yes, it happened to us. We didn't ask for it. Lots of things happen to us in the world that we don't ask for. But we need to take responsibility for our reactions. It's that old, what is it? E plus R equals O. The formula of your environment plus your reaction equals your outcome. You can't change your environment or your circumstance. You don't really control the outcome. The only thing you control is your reaction.
Right. And the thing is, as somebody who's dealt with the finances of cancer, it doesn't matter how well you keep your budget.
It doesn't.
Those medical expenses are exorbitant.
Yeah.
They are. And unless you have, I think there is insurance now for cancer, but it is, I think Dave would call it stupid tax.
It is. Yeah.
Because it's outrageous.
It is. And it's one of those things that when it comes to medical, anything medical, and I even hesitate saying this because I know the exorbitant cost of something like cancer. But when you have your budget, you have your emergency fund, you have, other funds for other bills, and you have a foundation, a plan in place, you're just that much closer to dealing with that. Right. You know what I mean? Like you just, it's easier to manage and to deal with unexpected when you have a plan.
It's, because when you deal with something like that, you're also dealing with other things that you don't even think about. One of the things that we found is that we went out to eat more because we were going to this doctor and to that doctor and to do this and to do that and to do this and do that. And there was a lot of different things, and you get emotionally spent. And there's a lot of decisions that are made in a budget. People talk about decision fatigue. It's the reason why when we leave the grocery store, we pick up frozen pizzas for dinner, or we stop by to get food to bring home for dinner, because we're so drained. But there is an emotional draining that happens, whether it's the person who has the cancer or the spouse.
Yes.
That you're like, I just don't care. I'm going to feed my family. I don't care. I don't care. So having that in place, make sure your lights aren't shut off. Make sure your water is still running. Make sure your toilet's still flush.
And, not that I'm trying to take anything away from the circumstance of having cancer, but it's the same thing for the single mom who's had a long day at work. And decides to go through a drive-through instead of going home and making dinner. And then just blew her entire budget. Yeah. Because that decision was made from an emotional place.
And we all do it.
We do.
We do. I mean, you think about the holiday season, you're like, oh, it's so great. It's home and cozy. And you're out shopping and you've been shopping all day and you realize I haven't eaten. You're going to stop and get yourself something to eat.
Yeah.
So it's preparing for the things that you can prepare for when you can prepare for them. Money is just something that we could talk about all day.
I know I could.
It's interesting how people fear it. They crave it. Yeah. They want the financial freedom. But I believe having that financial freedom is the same as having that beach body that everybody says they want. I want it, but I'm not willing to put in the work to get there.
Yeah.
So you have the mom who, and part of me knows what you're going to say. And I'm like, okay, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So we have the single mom, or we have the mom of little kids. She's exhausted. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's roll back to when our kids were little and we were both like going, oh my goodness, is it bedtime yet? No, it's 9 a.m. When's nap time? Oh, they don't nap anymore. Never mind. She's drained. She's tired. She's just trying to make it through. And now you're telling her, oh, but your life will be easier if you have a budget. And she's like, my life would be easier if my kids would take a nap.
True on both accounts.
She needs something easy to start with. And if you use that dirty word, budget, she might smack you with a dirty diaper. What is an easy place for her to start?
So when the first actual assignment that I give out when it comes to budgeting is actually what I call a 90-day look back. Because I think it's better to go back. But depending on circumstances, sometimes instead of having people go back and look at their expenditures for the past 90 days, for whatever reason, sometimes it's better just track your spending for the next 30 to 90 days. Because sometimes the simple action of making people aware will start to change their habits. And I'll use the example of I had a family of 5, and I used to do this, and I no longer do this anymore. But one of the first things I would do is, okay, roughly how much do you spend in these areas? And I would ask them to tell me what they think they spend in different areas. And I remember I had a family of 5 that said they thought they spent about $500 eating out, which I thought was, oh, okay. I didn't question that because that's a lot of money to spend eating out, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. When we did the 90-day look back and we tracked their spending, they spent over $2,000 eating out on average per month. And I don't say that to condemn anyone. We choose our lifestyles and we just want to make sure it fits into our plan for our future, right? But what I will say is they were floored. But then why were they floored? Because they weren't monitoring, they weren't tracking, right. They definitely weren't budgeting. So the first step is tracking, whether it's a look back or tracking from today to the next, and so on. Where are you spending money? What are you spending it on? And if we're talking about someone, like you said, a single mom, a mom of little kids, or someone who's going through a medical crisis or anything else, I would recommend also not just what they spend, but maybe even look at doing a little bit of, I hesitate saying journal because I love journals, but I understand not everybody does like the word journal, but just a note. Why did they eat out? Why did they do the drive-through? Was it a long day? And this could be simply done on a calendar. When you look at your calendar, like I know when I do my budget, when I do my meal planning, I look at my calendar and try to do it proactively, right? Because we know, oh, well, I've got 5 places to be that day. I'm not going to be making lasagna from scratch, unless I do it ahead of time.
Right.
So that would be my first step for her assignments. The other thing would be to look at how we can provide her the emotional support that she needs. Because again, budgeting is not all about money, right? It's those impulse buys, it's those decisions, it's those habits. And they all come from a place inside. It's, that accountability. I know I have a whole video in my one of my modules on accountability, whether that's, a friend, whether that's a spouse, whether that's a coach, whether that's, a parent. What is your default when you're feeling that way? What do you default to? And create a plan for it. When you have okay, I'll go back to meal planning. When I meal plan, I always have, I can plan out a beautiful menu for the entire week, right? Say we're supposed to be home or whatever. I always have what I call backup meals. If my day goes sideways, I have a backup meal. For
Right.
many years, my backup meal was literally a jar of spaghetti sauce and a box of noodles, right? Because it's quick, it's cheap, and it's easy, right?
Right.
It could be that frozen pizza in the freezer you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You have so we start looking at, okay, what's causing these behaviors and what can we do to get ahead of them? Because we're not going to stop bad days. We're
Right.
not going to stop life from going sideways, but we can prepare for it. Because life does happen and we know it happens. So we need to prepare. I mean, it's the same thing if looked at the whole concept of having emergency funds, the same premise. But since we're talking about, those people in those positions, and we know that budgeting is not just money, we need to get inside and say, okay, well, we don't want to just create the plan if we're not going to stick to it. We need to empower them with the tools to get them through those times where they wouldn't stick with it. And another thing that I know I alluded to earlier when I said the magic word credit card is, I'm not anti-credit card, okay? I'm anti using a credit card for things that aren't in your budget. I'm anti paying your credit card off at the end of the month. Now, what that means is some people can use credit cards, some people can't.
Right.
And so I'm tying that into those behaviors because I had a client who knew when she had a bad day, what made her feel better?
Shopping,
getting a mani-pedi, because she deserved it. She had a bad day. Well, if we take that credit card out of her wallet, it's not in her budget, it's not in her checking account, she can no longer do those things. Right. I had a recent conversation with this particular client, and just like a check-in, and she said, I'm still spending. She was still spending, right? But at least she was doing it in cash. So it's a progressive journey, right? So now she's out of debt. She still realizes that she spends probably more than she needs to because she makes a good income.
Right.
So she has, she recognizes that she still spends more money than she probably should on certain behaviors, but at least those behaviors are longer getting her into a debt situation.
That makes a lot of sense.
So it's just getting in, seeing the behavior, seeing the patterns, seeing the habits, and what can we do to empower them to break any bad cycles, break any bad habits, or be prepared for when those things come.
I understand that. I like that concept. I am one of the biggest things I struggled with Dave Ramsey was, well, just eat rice and beans. I don't eat beans. I would literally rather not eat than eat beans. And so, his whole concept of, oh, your grocery budget's supposed to be this size. And I'm like, dude, I am feeding 9 people. 6 of them are boys. There's only so far I can take my grocery budget down.
Yeah.
And I know people say that's the most flexible thing, but I have to feed a lot of people, and especially now in the middle of the pandemic, when I don't know about where you are, but here the groceries have gone up. We were in Indianapolis recently, and I went into the Aldi there, and everything was at least $1 to $2 more than what I pay. I make a menu plan. I don't fix extravagant, expensive meals with crazy ingredients. But it's still, my husband's like, well, let's cut back the grocery budget. And so I cut back. That means all the snack food that he enjoys goes away. And he's like, but where's my snack? So having that, where is that balance of, I get tired of eating the same thing over and over again, so I want to go out to eat, but I can't go out to eat because it'll break my budget. So we got to find a balance here. How do we find that?
So 2 things I want to touch on before I get to the exact answer to your question. One is, you mentioned Dave Ramsey, and I actually got my initial certification through Dave Ramsey. I do have different opinions on some things, like the credit card thing, right?
Right.
So it comes down to not just balance, which is your word, but also priorities. Because although yes, beans and rice is a complete protein and is a healthy meal, you can't eat that forever. And then you have, like in our home, we have dietary restrictions. So that that creates another budgeting issue for food.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, there's two things. And this is where my coaching comes in with a lot of my Ramsey clients anyway, because I draw from both arenas. One is the gazelle intense is what promotes that eat beans and rice, eat peanut butter and jelly, right? Eat
Right.
tuna fish. You know, he talks about his tuna fish sandwich moments. So gazelle intense is not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you take that piece out of it, you build that balance in. So in my experience, and again, this is going to be different for everyone. You know, numbers are going to be different, and priorities are going to be different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But that balance gets lost when you're not prioritizing your life, because again, it's not just about the money, right?
Right.
I'm not now. Hear me on this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't want to get out of debt as soon as possible.
Right.
But what I'm saying is you need to make sustainable choices to get out of budget. Because if you plan on eating beans and rice every night and then you fall off the wagon because you can't take it anymore and you go out, you've blown your budget. So that did not help anyone.
Right.
Right. So you need to create a sustainable plan with your priorities in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'll be honest, I coach people, right, that make choices for their family that I would never make for mine, because everyone's different. Everyone's lifestyle is different.
Right.
You know, and we can't judge where someone's coming from. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when someone says to me, "Oh, I've been spending X amount of dollars and I'm going to cut it back, and they cut it back a little bit," that's progress for them.
Right.
Whether I believe that category needs to exist or not in my own family, that's progress for them.
Mm-hmm.
And as a coach, that's my goal, is to see them have improvement. Right.
Right.
And, you know, back to that gazelle intensity piece, gazelle intensity is not sustainable for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and it boils down to those priorities and that balance that you speak of.
Well, we have special dietary restrictions as well, which is why I do the majority of my shopping at Aldi, because we can't have any dyes, artificial sweeteners, any of those things. And Aldi specializes in not having that if you buy their name brand.
They also specialize in having cheap groceries.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And their organic section's pretty good too. It's one of the things that I picked up on is, have you ever heard of Crystal Payne, the Money Saving Mom? Because she talks about grocery shopping. And I will go into Kroger and buy markdown meat, especially. And like last night for dinner, we had beef stew, which is an odd thing for us because beef is really expensive. But I got the meat really marked down. We use it quickly. I had picked up marked down baby carrots. They were like 25 cents a bag because they were all dried out.
Right.
All they need to be is rehydrated.
Beef stew is a great way to do that.
Throw in celery, throw in onion, throw in some potatoes that were starting to get soft and squishy. And there was dinner. I mean, the most expensive thing was the meat.
Yes.
But it's still, even though I think I spent, because we ended up using like 6 pounds, there's leftovers. So that's what they're having for lunch today. But that's the thing, they're having leftovers for lunch. Having that, I keep what I call a well-stocked pantry, where there's certain things that are those go-to easy meals, like you said, spaghetti. There are certain really easy go-to meals that don't take much time. I don't have to be the one to cook them. My kids know how to fix them. And I keep those items in my pantry. When we've made a meal from one of those things, I write down those things on my grocery list so that I can restock that and have it in my pantry. There's always spaghetti in my pantry. There's always spaghetti sauce. There's always Aldi's version of Rotel. There's always big bags of shredded cheese. Just those are the things that can make up a meal really, really easy and really, really quick. Because it comes back down to that basic thing of, I know the 4 walls, but food is just as foundational as keeping your electric on and paying your house bill.
It is. And it's, you know, You think back to, college days, living off ramen noodles and things like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's an opportunity cost when it comes to food, just like there is when it comes to money and time.
Right.
And that's like, if I put crap in, I'm going to eventually get crap out.
Right.
So, and we need to, and like you said, it all goes back to balance, and it's an investment in our health, what we eat. So anything we eat, anything we buy in our home, and for some people, like that is literally, I've had clients come to me because they're like, we need to do better in our health and our home, getting toxins out and just buying better food, but we can't afford it. So we need to get rid of this debt. And their whole why was because there
Mm-hmm.
was health issues coming up, and they knew they needed more money to put into food and non-toxic products and things like that.
Right.
They needed to get rid of the debt in order to do that. And that comes down to that legacy piece, because legacy is not always money. It's health and time too.
Yes. Yes, it is. Now, I have one more question for you, the hard question, because everybody always gets a hard question. I want to get a debt, but I need a vacation. And I know Dave would say, you don't need a vacation. But after the 2 years that we've had in COVID, where everybody's been locked down, okay, I will say this. I am an introvert.
Okay.
When everything happened and everybody was in lockdown, I'm like, yes, I don't have to give an excuse to why I don't want to go anywhere. But then everybody else was locked down with me. And it was like, just get me out of there.
I literally remember texting people, being like, you check in and people you don't always talk to during that kind of frame, and be like, I loved it the first 6 weeks and now I'm ready to kill somebody.
I just went out. I went out. And homeschooling, I mean, we do this all the time anyway, because our kids are home all the time, but we still can like escape for a little while. So you have people, I have debt I need to pay off, but I need a vacation. And I'm going to tell you, from somebody who went 10 years without a vacation, we took a vacation earlier in October. We take vacations off season because of homeschooling. We can take vacations whenever we want.
Yes, I'm right
so
there.
So we went to Myrtle Beach in October. We had a really great deal that we got a hold of, and where we ended up not even paying for our hotel.
Sweet.
We just paid for gas to go from Indiana down to Myrtle Beach, paid for our food. Going on that vacation and how I was afterwards was a completely different person.
Self-care.
It was self-care, because I did exactly what I wanted. I put my toes in the sand and I just sat there and watched my children play.
So
my question is, I haven't had a vacation in 10 years. Mm-hmm. I need to do something because I'm angry all the time. I'm snapping at people. I'm losing my mind. But I have debt to pay off. And if I listen to Dave says, don't take a vacation until your debt's paid off. It'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. But I may be another 4 or 5 years before I pay my debt off. And I may not be alive then. And maybe my family may not be alive then, because I will lose my mind. Yes.
So
my vacation's jail.
Yes. It could work. It's a possibility. No. No, it's funny because I had a client in a similar situation. The beginning of the summer, she came on, and she was honest with me. She said she actually considered not starting work with me until after her vacation, because she was afraid I was going to tell her not to go on vacation. Here's my answer. I don't tell you what to do with your money. These are your priorities. It goes back to that balance and that priority. So my only caveat is, can you go on vacation without going backwards into debt? So if we are looking at, we strip your budget, bare budget, making minimum debt payments, can you go on budget can you go on vacation without going into debt? So that's the first question. And that's not me saying, well, then you can't go. That's me saying that's something you need to consider. The second thing is, what are we talking about here? When you say vacation means lots of things to lots of people.
Right.
Are we talking 10 days in Tahiti? Are we talking, a drive to the beach that's like a few hours away? Are we talking, and then just, the idea of being mindful. If we're
Mhm.
on that debt elimination journey and we're on a vacation, we're just going to be mindful of that, right? We're not going to do all the bells and the whistles.
Right.
And this is one thing that this past August, my husband and I went to Niagara Falls
Oh, fun.
and we paid nothing. Now, with that said, I'm not currently in debt, but that did not play a factor in me paying nothing.
Mhm.
So, and that was credit card hacking.
I mean, like I said, we didn't pay for our hotel, and we stayed
Yeah.
at a Westgate resort,
Yeah. I mean,
which
there
was
are ways,
fabulous. Yes.
where there's a will, there's a way.
We I mean, the big thing that we did, the kids wanted to go to Wonderworks. That place is so loud. Remember the arcade of the 80s?
The
And
upside
make
down
it
house.
into, yeah, and just make that into a 3-story building.
Yes. I just,
That's what that
well,
was.
the entrance to Wonderworks had me out at day one when you had to go to the tunnel that spins. I'm like, is there another way around that?
Yeah. Well, first, if you walk in, it's upside down, so
Yes.
it throws your equilibrium off
Mm-hmm.
because you're thinking everything's gonna fall down on your head. You know it's not going to, but and then that tunnel. Oh my word, that tunnel. So that was our big expense. We had a kitchen, so we cooked. We cooked breakfast. We had breakfast in the hotel. We cooked almost every meal there. There were times we
Mm-hmm.
ordered pizza. We went to a couple of small restaurants that we had decided we wanted to try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the majority of the time, we were either at the beach or they had a heated pool.
Yeah, that's nice.
And so we were at one or the other. And there was one day it poured down raining, and we just curled up and watched a movie.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and this is probably something for a whole nother episode, but yeah, there is definitely ways for traveling that aren't going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars, unless of course you're flying to Tahiti. So there's that. But
And nobody's saying you can't fly to Tahiti because that
no,
sounds like fun.
we're just saying that you're going to pay for it, not with credit cards
Right.
that aren't budgeted for.
Right.
So
Well, and we had saved.
yeah, exactly.
I
And that was the same way. This lady, she's like, the hotel they were staying at was already paid for. And they had a rough year. They ended up with their grandchildren, custody of their grandchildren, and there was lots going on.
Oh
And
my.
she was in the same situation. She's like, my husband and I need this vacation. And I just want to know your thoughts on it. And she was funny because she was like, I'm still probably gonna go, no matter what you say. But yeah. And I'm like, and again, as a financial coach, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money. I'm here to help you create the habits, create the
Right.
path to get you where you want to go with balance, with your priorities, with your lifestyle for your goals.
Well, we had talked about how we need to do something small more often. So my husband said, "Hey, let's start looking at getting an RV and fixing it up. Getting an older RV, fixing it up, and then we could go camping."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay."
And for a large family, that is usually a more economical way.
Yeah.
I know I have friends that have lots of children, and for them to get a hotel, they often have to buy multiple hotel rooms because of limitations, and they have to you can't, even though they could physically
fit in. Yeah. Well, we ended up having 2 rooms, and they were connected, and we had one more person than what was supposed to be in those 2 rooms. But my youngest 3 are 8, 6, and 4, so they kind of all just
slept in a bed.
Slept in, I had a bed, and they were fine.
Yeah.
It worked out, and that's part of, I think, having that priority list of, look, what's more important? Everybody has their own bed, or we save some money and we do this, or you got to find those things that if this
you do.
It was important for me to not eat every meal in the hotel room because I didn't want to cook the entire time I was there.
Well, because it's your vacation too. And this is why I don't consider tent camping a vacation, because it's more work for me than it's fun.
Yes.
But that's me.
Now, I agree.
It's just that it always, like I said, it always comes down to priorities. And you're 100% right. Like I don't have little kids anymore. My kids are 15 and 17. We are not currently in debt, but we do want to pay off our home, and we do have other financial goals. And it comes down to the same thing I talked about before, opportunity costs and priorities, because,
Right.
within 5 years, my kids will not be kids.
Right.
And so do I want to relinquish those family vacations and memories because I want to pay off my home, and they're both good. They're both worthy goals, but it comes down to those priorities. And, maybe we need to find a balance and come halfway on some of those things, but it's definitely never a one size fits all answer. And that's why I love coaching. Like I guess I mentioned before, I created my own program called Faith-Based Financial Freedom Revolution. But inside of that, it includes weekly group coaching, because you can't just watch a standard one size fit all program and get the answer for every situation and get the answer that fits for you and your family.
Well, thank you for answering that hard question. I didn't know what to expect out of it.
Well, I was kind of worried. It's a hard question. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, that's not hard. I've already answered that one.
Well, but it's hard in the fact that, like you talked about your client saying, I'm going to do whatever I want to, but what is your opinion? And to be given that freedom of, it's your money, but can you do this without giving yourself more debt?
Yeah.
That makes a big difference, because then it's still up to them to make that decision. Well, thank you for your time today, Linda. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a really good conversation. Money is one of those things that it's like, it's stressful.
It is.
It's stressful. And the more kids I've had, the more stressful it's become.
Yes, but I love to challenge people in this area. I'm like, yes, it's stressful and it's hard, but it doesn't have to be. We can get you to a place where it's not.
So that is all I have for you guys today, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye.